Welcome back to Nerd Safari, friends. I'm Simon.
I'm Ellie.
And if you enjoy this video, if you could please remember to like, comment, subscribe, and hit that bell thing, that would be very kind of you indeed, bub. And we have just got back from watching the Deadpool and Wolverine movie on opening night here where we live in New York. And, you know, when I woke up this morning, I opened my phone and there was a news article that the title was Deadpool and Wolverine has the worst critical reviews of any movie in the MCU, making it Marvel's biggest flop ever. So I walked into this with a bit of skepticism, and I thought because there's a load of that FUD out there, maybe we would share our honest review with you as people that you trust, hopefully, and let you know what we think. Now, before we get into our review, I want to say we are not going to share any spoilers with you, or as few spoilers as we can possibly manage, which is really, really hard with this movie and this franchise. So we're not even going to include clips of the trailer in this, because the trailers were accused of being too spoilery, and we'll talk about that later. But we're going to break this down into a number of areas, and first up we're going to talk about humor and comedy. Now, obviously the Deadpool movies rely heavily on comedy. What did you think of the level of humor and the balance of humor against the other aspects of this movie compared to other MCU or Deadpool movies?
I think with talking about comedy and humor in specifically the Deadpool movies, it is very comedy humor forward in a way that I feel like the other, some of the other MCU movies, there is comedy, but the comedy is kind of like the added spice speckled throughout. Whereas with Deadpool, it's humor forward, and then occasionally it hits you with like tragedy and emotion within the humor as like a contrast to the other movies. And I feel like this is no exception to that. It is very it is a comedic movie. But it in some way it makes the emotion and the tragedy, it really hits hard because it's a comedic movie.
Yeah, I agree with you, because I think other MCU movies have been accused of leaning too hard into comedy and being too silly, but I think with Deadpool it's always had that balance of the silly comedy with the super extreme violence that I think, as you say, the violence, the emotion in the character, and there are always emotional scenes that we'll talk about later, but yeah, I think that balances out the humor quite nicely. I did think there's a lot of fourth wall breaking in this movie, and I wondered if people might find it annoying. Let us know what you thought about the level of comedy. I thought it just doubled down and continued trends that you'd seen in previous Deadpool movies and in the Deadpool comics, so I didn't dislike it at all. But I do wonder if other people might feel that there was too much humor or too much fourth wall breaking. I personally loved it. So, talking about action, talking about that balance of comedy and action, how did you feel like the action sequences in Deadpool and Wolverine compared to other superhero movies and other Deadpool movies?
I think for me personally, sometimes with action movies, they lean so much into like fight choreography that I think it really appeals to a certain type of person who really loves complicated fight choreography, whereas for me, I'm kind of thinking, okay, they're going into this fight with this mindset, and then they'll have the fight, and then they're coming out of it with that mindset. And so sometimes if it's really complicated fight choreography, it kind of turns me off, because I'm just like, I'm tuning out until I'm kind of like, I'm looking at the storyline, and so like the storyline comes in here and then it exits here, and so I'm just like, the fight itself, it makes me tune out. Whereas with this, that didn't happen, and I don't know, there's just, I don't know if that's like a skill set, or if it's just like the way the movie was, or just like how I relate to the characters, but like I didn't tune out at all with all the fight scenes and the action.
Well, I love those really well choreographed action sequences. I mean, particularly in the Avengers movies, there are always those moments where the team get together, the camera's panning around, and like one guy's doing this and the other one's flinging a bad guy there, and I love that kind of choreography. There was a lot of that in this movie, and particularly if you've seen the previous Deadpool movies, you know that like Angel in the Morning beginning of the first Deadpool movie, where it's almost like a ballet or something, like bad guys are being flung here, there, and everywhere, and horrible things are happening to them. There's a lot of that. I don't think that would surprise you. I felt like there were more action scenes than we've seen in previous Deadpool movies, and I really appreciated that. It felt like a long, complex movie, and the action matched that, and was brutal. And I gotta say, to finally see Wolverine, I know we've seen Logan in an R-rated Wolverine movie, and that movie got pretty bloody. I think Wolverine's role in the action scenes, I just loved. I'd always wanted to see, from the very first X-Men movie, I'd always wanted to see Wolverine in a true R-rated movie where he's the centerpiece of action scenes, and I was very, very happy with how that played out tonight. So you touched on emotion, and I'm gathering from what you said, there were certainly moments in this movie that genuinely made me tear up. Despite the action, despite the comedy, there was a genuine heart to this movie as well. Were there moments that kind of hit you in the emotions?
There really were. I think, like, we haven't talked about cameos, but I feel like there was a lot of weight to the movie that I wasn't expecting. And it doesn't take a hardcore comics, like, I know the lore inside and out type person to appreciate the weight that comes with this movie. And you don't need to know who everybody is. Like, it's just, there was, it was played very delicately, but also it really let you know what happened, like, behind the characters that were here. Like, the characters show up, and then it really kind of played out. This is their backstory. This is why this is important to them. This is where they've come from. This is what they aspire to. And there was a lot of unexpected weight to it, and I did cry. Like, I cried almost as much as you always do in these movies.
Well, we are skirting very close to the edge of spoilers with that one, but yeah, as you say, I don't think it's any surprise to anyone that there are cameos in this movie, just as there have been in every Deadpool movie. Remember Brad Pitt for that split second in Deadpool 2? There are lots of cameos. There were accusations at the final trailer that it contained too many spoilers, spoiled all the cameos. I will say that's not true at all. If you've seen the final trailer and you're worried about too many spoilers in that trailer, don't worry. There are still so many surprises, so many things that you just would not expect that are just a joy to watch. But to your point, emotionally, this movie, you know, you're talking about Wolverine, who's been, you know, Hugh Jackman's been playing this character for almost 25 years at this point, and playing that character extremely well. And we've seen him go from like a young guy joining the X-Men to an old man in Logan and die. And yet somehow this movie takes each character on a new story arc that feels very real. Like, it's a very rich story arc, and I just love that. And seeing that from these characters that we've known and loved for so long, they're like new story arcs, but they're faithful to the character that you know. And to your point as well, you don't. I think you're rewarded if you are a Marvel fan, and you know, if you've seen the previous movies, you know, of every incarnation, you will be rewarded by watching this. But it doesn't punish you for not knowing, you know, Marvel history and being a hardcore geek. Okay, so we've talked about emotion. We've talked about the cameos in the movie as much as we possibly can without spoiling anything for anyone. I wanted to talk about the use of music, because to me, like, that's something that's been a staple of Deadpool movies from the very start. Like I say, from that Angel in the Morning music when it started, and you see the bloodiest scene in the very beginning of the first Deadpool movie. How did you think the use of music worked in Deadpool and Wolverine?
I really liked it. Normally the music kind of like passes me by and it doesn't really register, but there was something about having music that you dance to at, like, not even high school, but like middle school discos, when you had like middle school dances, and having that part of the soundtrack and stuff that you know all the words to, it's just like, it adds something to the emotion of the time, because like Deadpool is kind of finding himself, and he's very much like, kind of like, in a weird way, like, he's a middle-aged man, but he's coming of age and figuring himself out. And so like having the stuff that you went to those middle school dances with, and that you know the words to, and that you remember like in your teenage bedroom like being annoyed with your parents about and memorizing these songs. And like there's something about that it really adds to it in some weird way.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I thought what was really clever was they used songs that had meaning. They used songs from popular culture that will have tremendous meaning when you watch the movie. But they also used songs that you thought, oh, this is catchy. I remember this. This is a silly, fun song. But by the end of the scene, you might be bawling while you'll
listening
never
listen to that song again the same way.
Yeah, exactly. And I think the use of music was so clever, both like the original versions of songs and then their doctored versions of songs were just absolutely fantastic. So I've got to ask, so I'm dressed as Wolverine, you're dressed as Deadpool, we've even got our love heart, our friendship bracelet necklaces on. After watching the movie, you know, we went in as Deadpool and Wolverine. After watching the movie, are you Team Deadpool or Team Wolverine, and why?
Oh, I think it's difficult because I've got a longer history with Wolverine, but like Deadpool is so fun, it's difficult not to be on Deadpool's side. It kind of feels like Deadpool is your whims of, fuck it, let's just do it. But Wolverine is like your, okay, but this is like our obligation, and this is like what we need to do, whereas like Deadpool is what we want to do, and so I feel really torn about it. Like I didn't go in like I knew, like obviously you know it's like Deadpool Wolverine, but like I didn't go in feeling one way or the other. You're like, but Deadpool is so fun, but you're like, but Wolverine is. I know I ought to.
So who is your team? The timer is up. You've got to make a decision.
Okay, I'm going to say Deadpool because it's too much fun not to be Deadpool.
Well, there you go. Because you said Deadpool, this is like choosing stuff from a menu in a restaurant. Because you chose the pasta, I'm going to have to go for the curry.
Okay.
No, because you chose Deadpool, you have to have Deadpool and Wolverine together. If nothing else, I hope... regardless of what people think of the movie, I hope they see it as kind of a buddy comedy. Yeah. And I feel like you need Deadpool and Wolverine, to your point. Deadpool is whimsy, Wolverine is like seriousness, but they also complement each other, and Wolverine has moments of whimsy and silliness, Deadpool has serious moments, so I feel like you need them to balance each other out. Yes. So you can be Team Deadpool, I will be Team Wolverine all day long, bub. Yay. So, your overall impression of the movie, and I'm sure people are wondering, should I go spend my hard-earned cash to go see this movie? What is your recommendation to them?
I went in with high hopes based on the entirety of the MCU, and like prior to the MCU, a reasonable familiarity with X-Men and Wolverine. And this really does credit to everything in a way that I wouldn't have thought was possible to put together. It really brings together like growing up with X-Men, the animated series, watching early MCU, like and then like breaking out to Deadpool before he was a part of the MCU. It brings it all together in a way that I was really skeptical about prior to seeing the movie, but also it wasn't in a cheesy like pandering way. It just like it brought it all together in like a way that was just it really hit the spot, I think.
I think you're right. I didn't feel like this was a fan service movie. Putting Hugh Jackman in a costume, my God, we didn't even talk about the costumes, but we should not because it may contain spoilers. But putting Hugh Jackman in a costume just for fan service would have been pretty lame, and you know, sticking him alongside Ryan Reynolds, especially if they had this sort of Vin Diesel, The Rock style relationship, it would have just been bland and awful and never worked. But I think the chemistry of these two guys, having known each other for years, was amazing. You know, there are so many moments, and it kind of hit home for me because there was a guy in the row behind us in the theater, and it was his birthday, and he was a giant Marvel nerd. And every time there was a Marvel reference, a pop culture reference, he would howl at the top of his lungs, absolutely bellow, to the point where you couldn't even hear the dialogue. that happened maybe every 3 seconds in this movie. So despite Birthday Boy howling his head off, I had a blast watching it. But there are so many references. And it just felt so well crafted. The same as the other 2 Deadpool movies did to me. Like, the first Deadpool movie, I think, is one of the best made movies of all time. And this one I really liked for the same reason. But I also think there are so many characters in the various incarnations of the Marvel Universe over the various, like, Fox and Sony and then Disney. I think there are so many characters that really didn't get their due. And this movie takes some of those characters and really does them justice. And it actually really reminded me of the way X-Men 97 followed on from X-Men the Animated Series and did those characters justice and gave them new life. Deadpool and Wolverine did the same, for me, to some of the characters from the broader Marvel Universe. And it was just wonderful to see. It was just a really, really beautiful thing. And I defy anyone to walk out of that theater with dry eyes. Like, I think anyone who's human, whether or not you're a Marvel nerd, is going to enjoy that movie, is hopefully going to cry like a baby and laugh like a hyena and whatever else comes in between. So there you go. The Birthday Boy really enjoyed it. We thoroughly enjoyed it, despite him howling 3 feet behind us. And we hope you enjoyed the movie as well. And we hope you enjoyed this video. And if you did, we will see you very, very soon, friends, on the next Nerd Safari.
Peace out, nerds.